This conference will now be recorded.
Thanks for that, Cheryl. So along with all of that, we, depending on how things are going, both in terms of putting the budget together and also with the office space search, we may come back and look to have a third meeting prior to the board meeting at the end of June. As you know, we need that budget to be approved at the board meeting, and we need your recommendation going into that. So we are willing to take as much time as we need with you to get you all comfortable for that and get through any details. And we are doing our best to deal with everything that's up in the air and in flux at the moment. Okay. That's the plan. Next slide. So in terms of what have we achieved thus far as an organization, from when we became the Green Bank in 2012 through fiscal year 19, we've had 8 years. We have been able to deploy $1.6 billion of capital. Our target was 1.68. You know, we're about 20 million shy of our target, which is pretty solid. I'd stick with that in terms of achieving goals. Did 42,000 projects out of our goal of 43,000. Installed 354 megawatts out of 391 as a target. You can see our latest complete year of FY19, we installed 67 megawatts, 67.7 out of a 72 megawatt target. We deployed $332 million, exceeding our target of $258 million. We installed 12,000 projects of a 7,700 target project, a 7,700 project target. And then thus far for 2020, we've had a pretty good year, the first 3 quarters of it. So I mean, we've had 8,000 projects, deployed $250 million worth of capital, and installed 63.8 megawatts of capacity. So we're getting close to our targets. And you'll see on here, I've included CO2 emissions avoided. And we wanted to pull that in because we're starting to put together targets around electric vehicles. And this year, they're not included today, but I will include them for next time, our targets on electric vehicles. And the way to really, the common denominator of all of our projects is that they are abating CO2. And so I wanted to just bring that in as a frame of reference, so you guys could see that.
Eric, I had a question on the chart. We've got the 354 megawatts, and then we've got the 63. Is that additional? Like that's added on if you were to bring it?
Yes.
Current. Okay. So we're
so
over.
Total capacity is over 400.
Yeah. That's great.
So, why don't we move to the next slide and we'll talk about what we're aiming to do this year. Leading up through the first 3 quarters, so everything you have seen up till now has been rosy. And so now we're having to take all this success and think about, all right, what's our activity going to look like in an economy that is certainly less robust. It has a lot more uncertainty in it than we've previously had. So what does that mean? And we've looked at things on a programmatic basis and looked at pipelines, looked at what our contractors are doing, and we've put together a range for you this year of where we think things are going to lie. And our approach on each of these has been different from each program. So I'll ultimately walk through each of those. But our approach to this is said, all right, here's what we think we could possibly do, but this is the more realistic version. So the realistic is our min and our max is what we could possibly do, assuming a V-shaped type of recovery, and the min is a much slower recovery economically. So we'll walk through that. And the other thing that we're going to be talking about today are our EV targets and our targets from our EV program. So I'll speak about that briefly, and I'll get you some more information ahead of the next meeting on that in detail. So why don't we move to the next? Yep.
This is Brian. Can I just add a little bit more on the min-max? So if we were to think about our goals for the fiscal year 2021 in comparison to what we had for fiscal year 2020, in general, kind of like a rule of thumb, the minimum that you see here across the board in terms of projects, capital deployed, and capacity is roughly 40 to 50% of what the targets were last year. That's the worst case. The best case, which is the max, is 65 to 80% roughly of what the targets were last year. So a lot went into that. Our team, as Eric explained, our team, Celia, Mackie, Bert, going out, talking to the market, getting a sense for where projects are, all had a bearing in setting those targets. We also used some of our contractor survey work that we did that really indicated broadly that of the existing business that they have in terms of delays and cancellations from customers, and in terms of new business that they expected to have, they were looking at a 60% reduction from what they had or what they were looking at. So that's kind of reflected in our worst case scenario. So just to kind of ground us in how these numbers were determined using all the best data that we have. Cool.
Well, that's that indicates a pretty rough year ahead from the contractors' perspective, if their predictions were right?
Very true. I mean, so there were a number of things that worried me in the study, and we actually just went through the findings with the utilities in deep at lunch on the survey. There were two things that really concerned me. One was that if you looked at the rehiring of employees for these companies, when would they rehire employees back? About 55% on average felt that they were going to hire back to where they were. Then the remaining 45% were kind of like, I may grow, but I'm not going to grow back. And some were like, I'm not going to grow beyond what I'm currently at. So that was one concern, was they don't expect to get back to where they were. The second one was, how much time do they anticipate it's going to take for them to recover their business entirely? And what we see is 6 to 12 months. So these are companies that have really been devastated by COVID-19. So that's why, a lot of what we need to focus on is how to keep stimulating them with, interest rate buy down catalysts, what we talked about last time at the board meeting, those sorts of things to give them confidence to reinvest and rebuild their businesses. But yeah, it's a long road ahead, John. That's
Yeah.
It's like you build something and you like a sandcastle on the beach, and the wave comes and takes it down, and you have to determine whether you're going to rebuild that castle on the side or not.
Right.
It's like that.
The one thing, and I not to prolong this, but so we generally offer products that services that in the end provide renewable energy at less cost than not using renewable energy. And so, what the premise is that what you get out of it is a better deal than what you came into it with. And so, and there's financing all the way along. So so even in a recession, doesn't it come down to a net positive for the people that use the programs, and how does the recession impact that?
So it gets to their pocketbook. You're right. Like if they feel like doing clean energy is going to put more money in their pocket because they're paying less for
Right.
electricity, then they're going to want to do it, right? They're going to be inclined to do it. So a large part of what we've built to this date, I think, has been that
Right.
they feel really confident in doing that. And in fact, Eric, continuing on his IT prowess with building the system that we now operate on, is working on a commercial calculator that is telling our municipal customers exactly what they're saving, because
Right.
for every kilowatt hour that gets produced, they're paying less for electricity than that kilowatt hour they're buying from us through the solar PPA. So we literally are building the real-time tool to show that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have to make those tools more apparent to the public so that we can move beyond those customers who have already done it and try to get those who are considering it over their own transaction costs. You know, they may be worried about their own jobs, their own families, and not have.
Yeah.
So we've got another barrier to get over. I don't know, Eric, if you had any other thoughts.
No, I mean, I think that sums it up well.
I was just going to add, Brian, that I think it's in an environment where you have lower costs for natural gas as well as fuel, fuel oil,
Right.
getting people to kind of switch out of, say, fuel oil into an alternative fuel, that becomes a bigger stretch because it's harder to make that case on the switch alone. So usually you'll be relegated to the systems that are older, that are broken down. Alternatively, you can combine with solar, which is still a really good bargain for customers in the state, because just by virtue of the fact that electricity costs so much. And so that's in our particular context, it's where you can kind of blend the two savings. You can blend the savings of where you're definitely getting the savings from solar with energy efficiency, where, well, there's always savings in it. Well, there's generally savings in energy efficiency, but there might not be a savings associated with like equipment switch outs for fuel switching or more efficient equipment, but you might be able to get there by a combination of measures. So it's particularly if you're talking an institutional purchase or business. So that's probably going to be more of the approach, I think, in terms of determining or demonstrating those overall savings with the tool that Brian was referring to.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah.
So why don't we walk through our two business segments, the financing programs and the incentive programs, and we'll go program by program with what we're expecting to achieve this next year. So starting with CPACE, we're aiming for somewhere between 33 and 48 projects for between 15 and 23 million dollars in capital and between 5.3 and 7.1 megawatts of installed capacity. That's down from what we've achieved thus far this year, but is representative of what we see in the pipeline, and which is still down and is in line with an average of our two worst years. So assuming that we have a really bad time at this, that's kind of where how we ended up with that.
Can I ask you something about, are there other states that do anything like CPACE?
Yes.
And is their experience similar to ours? in terms of the kind of a little bit the stodginess of the market and
Yes.
that type of thing?
Yes. Well, you've got a couple of things going on in other markets, John, that are happening less here. At least what has been happening in other states over the last couple of years. There's been an emphasis on using CPACE as a new building tool to kind of provide. Basically, what it does is it displaces the equity that the developer is required to put up. Typically, that'll be in the range of 30% to 40% of the capital stack that a developer has to put up, depending upon the requirements of the senior lender. What CPACE can do is it can kind of displace maybe 20 points of that capital stack. And so when that new building goes up, instead of being a 60-40 deal, it's a 60-20-20 deal. So that saves the developer, will save the developer much needed equity that they can then put into the next deal. And it's been demonstrated around the country that lenders are getting more comfortable, with that longer term slug of PACE financing in the capital stack, so long as the debt service coverage ratios will pan out. So that's one thing. Now we do have PACE for new construction in Connecticut. We just tend to have less new construction that's going on. That doesn't mean there's no new construction going on. There's
Right.
some. And we're actually looking at a transaction right now in Bridgeport that would be an $11 million transaction for PACE financing. That's not to say that that's ultimately what would be done, but probably if that deal comes together, somewhere in the 7 to 10 million capital requirement, let's say. But that just gives you an example of how one transaction, using PACE toward new construction and getting more energy savings than otherwise would have been delivered by a new construction, can just dramatically increase the amount of capital that's deployed in the market. So,
Right.
I mean, that transaction alone is somewhere in the 50% to to one third to 50% of the goals for next year, for instance. I mean, just that one transaction. I mean, if it were to come through, but that's like chasing the white whale, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get lucky.
Yeah, well.
But to your point, that's one thing that's happening in other markets. The other thing that's happening in other markets in the era of COVID is that other programs have a longer look back period for, say, energy efficiency that might have been installed already, but not financed with CPACE. And so the building owner will come along in those markets and say, hey, I need some liquidity out of my building, almost like a homeowner, a residential homeowner would say, can I get a home equity loan type of an arrangement?
Uh-huh.
And so a number of those CPACE originators around the country, because they can look back maybe 3 years, and we're currently looking back a year because of our program guidelines, which we might decide to relax a bit depending upon a case by case basis. But some originators across the country are now offering those types of financing in order to allow small and medium businesses to access some of the capital that's locked up in their property, so that they can enhance the building and provide some additional working capital for getting through this COVID period. So that's just kind of two of the examples that I would point to where, say, around the country. But generally, the market has been slowing down, except for the PACE for new construction segment, where you get these really big slugs of capital, quite often $20-30 million at a time in buildings around the country where it's going up. So just to give you some context.
Yeah, well, thank you. And it would seem to me that if you're working with developers, that there's not as many of those as there are contractors, like for doing rehabilitating buildings and stuff. So if you have a relationship with a developer, and that that could lead to a series of projects, perhaps.
And that is the case with the transaction that I mentioned in Bridgeport, where we have that happens to be sourced from someone who has used the PACE program, I think 3 times already. And that was just for energy efficiency and solar. But now that developer is putting up a new building, and because of COVID, one of their financing parties had to step away from the project. But so they came back to us and said, look, we really want to move forward with this, and we think it's a well-positioned property. It probably would come on stream in terms of its units in about 2 years' time. So that would be well beyond hopefully the COVID recovery period. So, but yes, to your point, yes, with relationships with developers are things that Mackie and his team have been working on.
Well, thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
Yeah. No. So, from CPACE and that being down, we are expecting to make some progress with the PPA, and our pipeline there includes the state and municipal projects that we've been working on for a while. So there is some good news in that. We're looking to do between 30 and 58 projects, between $4 and $6.8 million worth of capital deployed, and that is between 6.2 and 11.7 megawatts of capacity installed. Another bright spot on here is with our SBEA facility with Eversource, where I'm sure that you'll recall that we've worked with Amalgamated Bank to provide a financing solution that lowers the cost of capital for this program, saving ratepayers money. We've been doing this for SBEA now for about a year, and we're going to be expanding that hopefully to the Business Energy Advantage program. The difference between BEA and SBEA is the size of the participant. So expanding this will be able to hit larger businesses and help them reduce their energy burdens and reduce the cost for ratepayers simultaneously. And so we should be using this facility for another 1,200 loans, and that's for an additional $20 million worth of capital deployment. SMART-E, our forecasts here are based on how rosy and how quick of a recovery there's going to be. Basically, that doing 540 projects, which is the upper end of this target, is based on if we have a very quick recovery, and that is around what we've done thus far this year in terms of activity in the SMART-E program. The inverse of that is basically doing half of that, and doing 270 projects for $3.5 million. So a much more modest goal there. Posigen is based on how quickly there's uptake in the RCIP. It's a percentage of the RCIP in terms of the way that we look at this is it's a percentage of RCIP in terms of the LMI PBI that we offer. We have, again, assuming that the RCIP isn't extended and there's slower uptake, we expect to do just 177 projects here. If the RCIP is extended or there's a faster recovery, we could hit 300 projects next year. Multifamily for both pre-dev and term, I mean, these are based off of what's in the pipeline. We are, and the same for health and safety, we're really expecting to not have much activity in the space next year. That these are the hardest projects to get over the threshold in the first place, and they're the most sensitive to capital constraints. And so I think they're going to be some of the most challenging to get done next year. And finally, we have our strategic investments. And while I don't have anything in there, that doesn't mean that we have nothing in there. I think that we need to just have another conversation around exactly what we're setting as that target. I know Bert came up with the goal of $5 million worth of our capital to be deployed, but we need to talk through the likelihoods of what of the many things that have been thrown onto the table we think will actually cross the line of that. Mm-hmm. And those possibilities range from anything from shared community solar to battery storage to additional fuel cell projects. Did I get that right, Bert?
Yes.
Cool.
Hey, Eric, this is Brian. If I could add just a little bit more on the PPA side and the municipal side, and then Smart E. So on the maximum side for the PPA, yes, as you all have heard, we're making great progress on the lead by example with the state. On the municipal side, we ran a pilot this year, actually, that took advantage of two things. One, our relationship with Sustainable Connecticut and the 100+ municipalities that are now registered with Sustainable Connecticut. So we use that relationship to then develop a program that we called Solar MAP, Solar Municipal Assistance Program, where we allowed those municipalities to tell us if they were interested in solar. We did a remote desktop review of all their buildings. So each of those towns would send us, they would say, yes, we're interested in learning more. They would send us the addresses for all their buildings. We would do a desktop review of what buildings we felt solar could be developed on. We would then send that list back to the town. They'd say, okay, we like building X, Y, and Z. We'd then send engineers to the town and actually do blueprints for the solar on the rooftops. And all of that was great. And we had a huge pipeline, nearly 10 megawatts worth of projects from 2010 before COVID-19 hit. So the team is now trying to communicate with the towns on, given what we've learned, we're willing to bid into the ZREC auction that's now happening, but let us know if you're fine with, these projects. So the team is literally trying to hold those remote meetings now to see how many we can pick up. But we figured out a way of creating lots of demand here by working through a sustainability channel and developing a customized program for these towns to essentially provide them cheaper, to your point, John, cheaper power. Right. And then on the Smart E side, so the max there is based on how well the interest rate buy down that we're expecting to roll out performs. So you might recall that we had actually anticipated rolling that out in this fiscal year, but we held, given that we ran into COVID-19. So we're going to use it as a stimulus when we're ready. And Mike, we just learned today from Vicki that the utilities are looking to offer beyond HES free insulation and a buy down of the air source heat pump installed cost. So if there's extra capital needed to finance those air source heat pumps, between the interest rate buy down and that gap, the Smart E loan will be able to pick up more projects. So we're optimistic, but we're still trying to be conservative with the min goal.
That is great, though, about the offer to install at no cost. That makes a big difference.
Yeah. Insulation, which is huge. Yeah. The state has a big weatherization goal, so it makes complete sense.
All right, so moving on to the incentive programs. So in our incentive programs, we have our RSIP and a proposed battery storage program. First, talk about the RSIP, and this is dependent on how quickly there is recovery, how quickly um, homeowners gain comfort around allowing installers into their home, as well as if the RCIP actually gets extended. So assuming that it doesn't, we will hit 2,800 projects for $86 million worth of capital and 24 megawatts of capacity. If it does get extended, if things go quicker, we expect to hit 4,700 projects and $143 million of capital and 40 megawatts installed. In terms of battery storage, as this group will, I'm sure, remember, last year we talked about our EAP application and our proposed EAP pilot, the Energy Efficiency Partners Program through PURA and DEEP to install battery storage for existing RCIP customers. Right now, the Green Bank is submitting under docket 17-12-3 a response to the request for program design for combined energy or electric storage and behind the meter residential solar PV program. So this would marry battery storage with existing RCIP installations. BG, I don't know, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, just some more context. So Lonnie will remember, this is your big grid modernization bill from, what was it, 2017, when you had the big hearings on it. You brought Richard Kaufman up to talk about REV in New York. Chair Gillette from PURA last October opened up this equitable modern grid docket. It has 6 different reopeners, from energy affordability as reopener 1 to electric storage as reopener 3 to interconnection as reopener 6. You know, so she had a number of different things. She sought public input for the last 6 months and just recently put out to the market these requests for program designs. So on the electric storage side, they are inviting proposals from those who understand how these technologies could be deployed cost effectively, and is inviting proposals. And, you know, given our experience in the Electric Efficiency Partner Program with the proposal that we put forward there and the closing by PURA of that docket, but the deferral to do something in this docket, we've got a lot of work ahead of us to prepare an application. But so this is kind of one of those. Actually, we should probably have the min be 0 and the max be 400. Min being we don't get it, max being we get it and we start in January. But a lot of work still left to be done for that process. These RFPDs will come back to PURA July 31st. PURA will then review them, possibly issue a draft decision. It's not really clear. Making a decision, then inviting public comment, and then issuing a final decision. So if all of that happens and a proposal from the Green Bank is elected, then we could begin a battery storage program January 1st of 2022, or wait, 2021. So that's
Brian, this is Lonnie. Just a quick, are you, I mean, I know you probably are, it's probably a rhetorical question, but I mean, you talking to the governor's team there about, you know, are they amenable to this? Is that on their radar at all? Because it's such a big, a big deal to really go forward intelligently. And, you know, it's good to have them on board early to be thinking about it. And, you know, Josh Jabal really is good at this stuff. I mean, Paul too, Paul Mounds, but I mean, Josh really kind of gets how all these numbers go together and how putting policy together incrementally like this. I mean, it's really a big picture approach.
Yeah, I suspect if I had to guess, they would default more to MOHIT, you know, MOHIT?
Yes.
Yeah, so I suspect that they would default to MOHIT. You know, we have our follow-up on the RCIP work with DEEP and PURA coming up in a week and a half. So that's a conversation. And then on electric storage is still House Bill 5351, which was started at the beginning of session this year, which was to create a battery storage target. And still in this docket is referenced to HB 5351 without it passing. So there's no telling what's going to happen this session in terms of whether or not the legislature is going to revisit any committee proposals. If I had to guess, we'd be looking at a potential governor's bill with legislated items that had full support of the ENT committee, of which I think the battery storage would have that. So yeah, it's kind of still to be determined.
Yeah, but I really like it that you guys are still pushing for this, because that's really the only way to go moving forward.
It's quite good. I mean, we've run the numbers many times, and we all know, to John's point, that the economic benefits to the host is there. What battery storage does is it not only gives the host some more confidence in emergency backup, but by allowing the utilities or third parties to control the dispatch of that battery, we actually create a lot of ratepayer benefits because we can reduce peak load. So the benefits are really off the charts when you combine solar with batteries. So it's naturally, to your work, Lonnie, on the tariff, this is naturally like what has to happen is you need a system that has both so that everyone can benefit from it.
Oops. Thank you.
And then when you combine that with an electric vehicle, it really, then you really have the whole package.
Yeah, because then you're charging your vehicle, and your vehicle could potentially down the road be a source of battery storage as well.
Right.
And then if you keep taking that to the air source heat pumps, you can displace your heating oil. So yeah, these are the wedges, and this is like the foundation of our comprehensive plan to address those wedges, right? A zero emitting grid, moving transportation to the grid, and moving how we heat our buildings to the grid. Yeah, so
Right.
it's all battery storage is right at the front of all of that. So it's exciting.
Cool. So I'll just pause for a minute on here. Any other questions on this? And all right. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, I think that, I think we've got to be cautious, and at the same time, if it breaks differently than we think for some reason, which I don't think it will, but if it does, I'm sure that we can adjust as needed. Yeah, no, I think that this is a responsible projection.
Okay.
Maybe Eric, maybe three more just comments. So one is, yes, John, we can come back in January per our kind of mid-course correction to adjust. Secondly, we are adding, to Eric's point earlier, a fourth target, which is CO2 emission reductions, which
Right.
is exciting because our mission statement is now to confront climate change, right? So
Yeah.
by adding that fourth goal, what you're going to see here is another column that interprets the deployment target into an annual greenhouse gas emission reduction. So we'll actually have that estimated. But thirdly is to what Eric was talking about before on the EV pilot.
So I was just going to transition to that. But
There
go
you
ahead.
go. Well, you want to take it? Go ahead.
No. Go for it.
All right, you help me out. So one of our research and development projects that we've been working on has been to develop a voluntary carbon market for carbon offsets from electric vehicle recharging stations. You all might recall that we worked with a number of industry groups, EVgo, I can't even name them, a number of utilities to develop a standard upon which cars that are charging at EV stations across the country would be producing carbon offsets. So we developed that standard. The standard went for public comment, got approved. The group really looked to us to help support it, to continue its support. So what Matt Masunis has been doing has been onboarding owners of EV recharging stations. So he's got several of them lined up. Eric or Bert can speak to who they are. but he's, I think, looking to onboard 1,000 EV chargers and set a goal for next year. He's already onboarded 1,000 and is looking to set more targets for next year. But you can imagine that given where those chargers are located across the country, some are generating more offsets than others. For example, a charger in Washington State, where you virtually have zero emissions given hydro and renewables, that for displacing gasoline from vehicles with clean energy, zero emitting energy, you get a lot of offsets, versus states in the South that might be, in some cases, it's actually worse. The cars are, electric cars are using like coal. So you don't want to support markets there. So,
Oh God.
Yeah.
so what's happening is the groups are registering with us their EV charging stations, and then we are working to resell those to a voluntary purchaser in the market, or purchasers, universities, companies, those who are interested in offsetting their emissions with voluntary targets. So what you'll see, I suspect, is going to be a target on this area here with regards to the number of rechargers. And then on revenues, our revenue budget, you will see, we still have to estimate it, what the likely revenues are from those offsets. And we're providing 85% of those revenues back to the EV charger owners and keeping 15%. So it's like one of those research projects that's come full circle. And the hope is that, over time we generate some revenue ourselves and use that revenue to support EV rechargers in vulnerable communities, provide a little bit more juice for them.
Right.
Eric, what did I miss, Bert?
No, you got it all.
I think you hit it all.
We don't want to go public with anyone right now because I don't think they've necessarily publicized their names.
Well, but certainly, cutting carbon out of transportation is where it's at. Given a lot of work that's already been done in residential, and the fact that 38% of the carbon is coming from transportation. So, I mean, we really, if we want to address the problem, we really need to be in that sector.
Yep, and to that point, there's an EV roadmap that we released maybe about a month ago. And one of the other reopeners in the docket that I was mentioning, reopener number 4, has to do with zero emission vehicle infrastructure. So Chair Gillette is looking to address recharging stations at public facilities, private facilities, apartment buildings, so again, it'll be another request for program designs on that, but she's keenly focused on trying to get the ZEV MOU targets hit for Connecticut. I think it's 250,000 ZEVs by 2024 or something like that. But yeah.
Well, and what's happening now, I mean, to really leverage what's happening now with the clean air that we have, because
Right.
so many vehicles are off the road, to really drive that point home. I guarantee if you start looking at the data, the people are healthier. There's so many aspects to it that really need to be utilized going forward in terms of selling it, because people have gotten a real, people who really don't care about this stuff, whose eyes glaze over when you talk energy, they're like, I can't believe the water's so clean, the air's so clean, I don't have the asthma I used to, and really figure out how to sell that, because that's been a little window into the future that we need.
So right. You want to
So true.
Yeah. Great.
Great.
Anything else, Eric?
No, I think that covers where we are today, and so we will we'll make a couple of adjustments on this in terms of getting the CO2 equivalents in here. Lucy and I just got that work through last night, and including the EV target. So you'll see that ahead of the next meeting. So why don't we move on to revenues? So For revenue, we're forecasting a 5% decrease in utility customer receipts from the Clean Energy Fund. So that's based off of what we've seen thus far this quarter since the lockdown. Looking at what has gone on historically, where we think we are. Bert did this really great in-depth analysis on it. Jane did her own analysis from a different perspective and ended up in a similar place, and we got to 5%. In terms of the regional greenhouse gas initiative allowances for those auction proceeds, we're going to remain flat. Those were up so far this year versus our forecast, so there is a positive in that. We have increased interest income because we've stuck to our sustainability plan in terms of investing and making sure that we have our money invested earning for us. So we're expecting that to increase. And as you'll see, rec sales and rec revenue remain an increasingly important part of our budget. Next slide. So I'm happy to walk through the details of this. I know that there's the handouts that you guys got in the mailing in terms of those revenue.
Maybe Eric, maybe let me just give a little bit more commentary on it and kind of bring it back to John, and I'll set some context, Lonnie, for our sustainability plan that we developed coming out of December of 2017. So when you look at the revenues, our leading source of revenue is the Clean Energy Fund, the System Benefit Fund, and about 25 million. And it used to be that our second source of revenue, the RGGI allowance revenue, was the second highest. What's happened is our second highest is now the SHREC revenues that we're receiving from the RCIP projects and now issuing as bonds. And the whole goal there was to generate revenues over time that would cover the cost of the incentives and cover the cost of administering the programs. So we're making really good progress. You actually see a budget of $9.5 million for SHREC revenue for the next fiscal year. So a little bit less than half of our system benefit fund coming back from SHREC revenue. Then the third highest revenue item ahead of RGGI now is interest income. So what we actually do is use our Clean Energy Fund revenues and our RGGI revenues to invest in projects that generate interest income. And our goal, as you might recall, John, was for the interest income and the principal income to cover the cost of the operations. That was our break-even point.
Right.
So what you see here is that we're delivering on that plan by increasing our interest income. This is just interest income that you're looking at in the budget as opposed to principal too. I think the principal, Bert, when I looked there, Eric, when I looked at your sheet that you sent to Bob Lamb, was about the same size as interest. It was like doubling it. So both of them together are about $11 million a year in principal and interest. So to me, it was like, great. It's all kind of moving in the same, it's moving in the direction of what we want, what we had planned for the sustainability plan.
It also, it's
quick question. Sorry.
No.
I was just going to ask, is the slide deck moving? I still see the key highlights. I didn't know if you were referring to another slide, Peachy.
No, I'm referring to the material that was passed out. Yeah.
Okay.
P1. Page
okay.
P1.
Gotcha. Thank you.
So I was just going to say that it seems as though that we're maintaining kind of that sweet spot between being responsibly self-sustaining, but not making money in a way that would cause the legislature to say, well, why don't we, turn down the tap on them because they don't need it. And it's a hard line to walk, but I think we're kind of there at the moment.
I don't
Yeah,
want to say that we're self-sustaining yet, but we're certainly making progress
Yeah,
towards
yeah.
getting.
Yeah, but the idea is, and I don't know, I guess that is the goal, but right now, I don't think anybody could say that we're not towards the good, and but at the same time that we don't need the money that's we get from the ratepayers.
that's right. Yeah, it's a total balance.
Yeah,
Like we have to deliver the good in terms of energy cost reductions to the customer in order to generate enough deal flow to support our sustainability.
right.
So yeah, it's a total balance in doing that. The other thing I guess I'd point out in terms of the materials is that Bert and Jane, as Eric mentioned, on the utility customer assessments, did a great job. Also on the Regi auction revenue projections, Jane did a great job really simplifying the presentation to be really transparent on, the auction, the price, the allowances, what we receive from them. Great job there. And I know the team has spent a lot of time on the rec revenue projections. So you all can imagine, I forgot how many megawatts we have here now. Probably, if I had to guess, 240 megawatts of 40,000 systems that are producing RECs, that our team did an estimate by quarter of what they're producing. So they did a really good job laying it out in P4, and this analysis is continuing to get better, so it will only improve over time. But this is the second year we've provided it, and it gets better. So the 9.5 million that we estimated is based on really good analytics from the group.
And I can't stress enough the need to for it to be as not just transparent, but as simple to understand as possible, because the people that would go after us are not going to be financially sophisticated necessarily, and so we need to be able to spell things out in a way that people can understand, including the ratepayers, the people that are paying the bill for this stuff.
That's right. Agreed. Eric, I don't know if there's anything else on revenue that you wanted to.
Before you move to Eric, just picking up on John's point, John, I think that's an excellent point. I mean, I think that, just as we back in late 2017, early 2018, introduced the concept of we formalized what we had been doing all the time, but in our financials, started, at least for management purposes, presenting, as you've been seeing, the investment business and the incentive business. And I think that maybe we need to take that a little, almost a step further in terms of presenting almost like the cost recovery aspects, so that the people up in Hartford don't start to salivate around seeing all these numbers from rec revenue and say, oh boy, that's a pot of gold we can go after.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's really cost recovery and dedicated to paying out incentives and paying for the administration of the program. It's a zero-sum game. Remember, that's what you passed a few years ago.
Right.
So, but yeah, you're so right that we put out a lot of numbers, but we really need to dumb it down to some key summaries. And I think we keep getting better at that year by year. But
yeah,
I think you raise a very important point.
Well, and I think Lonnie, again, having lived through these sweeps as well on the other side of the equation, really make sure you get the municipalities on board. That so many municipalities are really benefiting and seeing the impacts, and they're very happy. I know here along the shoreline, they're very happy with the CO2 rejections, and it's fitting into the shoreline sustainability programs that a lot of
So
these
true.
communities are putting in. So to really get them on your team, talking to their legislators
Right.
is really key.
So true.
Excellent. Great
Yeah.
point.
Mhm.
Gotta point Matt to this section. Yeah, good.
Good. And yeah, I think the only other thing that I would highlight on here is on that rec schedule that BG was talking about, just how much time goes into that and how much effort that we built into that, just recognizing its importance. And our next thing is how do we automate that so that we can keep better tabs on that? And so we're exploring a couple of options. So
Excellent.
Well, that's great stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's a really fine job that everybody's been doing on this stuff, and this is why the Green Bank just remains like you know, top rate institution in terms of what's happening in Connecticut. It's just been one of the places that no matter where else we are shooting ourselves in the foot, we can kind of point to the Green Bank and say, hey, well, here's here's a reason to be optimistic.
What a concept.
Well, and
Put smart people
yeah.
in charge.
Yeah.
Doesn't
So,
always
Yeah.
happen.
well, and you know, and one thing that the board in approving the master trust indenture structure, which we've been working under Brian's leadership, you know, he first of all, he's just been great in terms of how he's corralled all these these minds to kind of come up with these concepts. But that's something where we're going to Madam Chair, you spoke to the municipalities getting a lot of benefits and everything else. It's just part of the strategy that and the vision that Brian has laid out in terms of developing a big cohort of citizen investors who are you can put panels on your roof. Great. If you can't do that, you can do energy efficiency. Great. If you've done that, there's community solar if you can't put panels on your roof. And if you really like what we're doing, you want to support the Green Bank, and if you want to earn some income, you can buy our bonds and become part of our movement. So it's just something where that the structure that the board has approved is not only going to make us more financially resilient, but actually develop these citizen investors around the state and really have them invest in their own state and get a direct return, and for modest sums of investment that that they can appreciate for years to come. So, and we're developing that program where hopefully every year we will be coming to market with at least one bond issue, so everyone always has something to look forward to. So it's all part of the overall plan.
Green
Yeah,
Liberty.
it's good.
Good. Awesome. All righty.
cool. So in our remaining half hour, I'd like to just go through where we are in terms of the office space search, so that we're well versed when we come back to you in a month. So as we previously mentioned, our leases for both our Rocky Hill office and our Stanford office are up on December 31st. In Rocky Hill, we have our 35 full-time staff, including our cohort of staff from IPC. Those numbers have shifted a little bit since then. We have a couple of additions on the Green Bank side and our seasonal flux of interns when we are actually in the space. So things have actually gotten a little bit tight in there. In Stanford, our 4,000 square feet has been serving us just fine. You can see that our average cost, or I'm sorry, our annual cost of rent for 2020 are in there for $176,000 for Rocky Hill, so $20.75 a square foot versus $25.50 per square foot in Stanford. Next slide. Our vision is to be part of a community and be in an office space that really speaks to our mission, and making sure that we're in an office that's sustainable. And we want to do that while also contributing to the organization's sustainability plan from a financial perspective. So we don't want to blow the bank on that. And those have really been the driving forces in our search. So next slide.
And John, that's still your framed Executive Order 1.
I know.
Let's leave it. Let's leave it here. We'll
Happy
keep
to see it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, just a timeline of kind of what we've done. When we last spoke, we told you that we had selected a broker. The broker had issued an RFP for office space. We'd been out to tour buildings. We were going to do an RFP for an architect. We held that based off of the spaces that we were looking at. We continued to review spaces. Then the COVID-19 happened. So we slowed down a little bit. But we've been continuing to negotiate and go back and forth with the finalist buildings in both markets. We also, to make sure that whatever we move into is aligned with our mission from a green perspective, we worked with our technical partners for the CPACE program, ERS, Energy Resource Solutions, to go evaluate these buildings and see if they could work with the landlords and management to identify ways that these building owners could retrofit the buildings to save energy and save money. And so they've just completed these, and we are currently going through them with the building owners to say, all right, on one hand, we're talking about what our lease is. Let's also talk what you can do to save yourself some money overall. Mm. And those conversations are going better than I thought. They're more well received than I thought they were going to be in most cases. So we're continuing to move along. BG, next slide. So in terms of Hartford market, we're really down to, we've narrowed this down from a bunch of different options to 5. It's narrower than that, but I mean, there are 5 contenders at this point. So you can see they all give us a little bit of room to grow. They're all more spacious than what we have now, but not by a huge amount. You can see the cost per square footage in there, and that is a net average. So that takes into account the operating costs, the rent, and the escalating rent and the escalating operating costs over the life of the lease. And then present values that back to today. I think we used a 6% discount rate, and we're also including parking costs just to make sure everything is included and comparable. And you can see the average annual costs for these spaces. And in terms of mission alignment, we have a lot of different things. So we have one building that's used CPACE in the past. There's not much more that we can do there. We have another one that there are some opportunities, but they're all over the place, and we don't have a firm commitment from the building owner to do anything. We would be a small player in the building. We don't have much leverage, and the low-hanging fruit are done there as well. To another one where there's a ton of opportunities, the management is engaged, and they're itching to do solar. They're itching to do everything. There's another one that is a ridiculously green building. They've already implemented pretty much anything that you could do there. But you can see that has a very high has a very high cost per year. And then when we last spoke, we were encouraged by this group and the board to make sure that we were working with our current landlord to see what that would cost. So we have included that with a growth in our footprint. Something just became available. That number in terms of average annual cost, that was what they gave us. They have since rescinded that offer, and I'm not entirely sure what they're going to come back with. They still want to keep us. I don't know if the pricing that they gave us is going to hold at $29 per square foot on average. So we'll
with the pandemic, it should be going down by 20%.
That is exactly what I thought, and the opposite happened at the end of last week, beginning of this week. So yeah, and they also don't have a very firm commitment in terms of doing anything that really aligns with our mission. As you all have been in our building, you know, you may have noticed its draftiness, its leakiness, both from a thermal and a rain nature. And yeah, we would love to address some of that if we did stay, as well as put in some solar. But I mean, as you can see, we have plenty of opportunities that actually would be lower cost over the lives of the leases that we have on here than what we're currently paying, that really would align nicely with our mission and bring us into a much more vibrant community. When we look
Eric?
at Stanford, yes?
Oh, it's just Lonnie for a sec. So I know a lot of my friends in New York can't wait to get out of an urban setting now. They're like, oh, the suburbs are looking better. Are you seeing are you getting any feel for that, how that might be impacting not only opportunities, you know, I mean, it feels like maybe some landlords might be, you know, losing some key tenants, or, you know, just sort of looking around at how that's going to play out.
In Hartford, the brokers haven't seen that, and I think that's due more to the size of the city and what's available in the suburbs for space. They haven't seen a huge push for people to move out of the city, and a lot of it is there aren't huge places for people to move out to that are available. So I think one thing that both of our brokers have said is, oh, there's going to be this big push of telecommuting that you'll see over time decreases in footprints of organizations and cities. And I think that's true. But the one point that we all keep coming back to is nothing's going to happen overnight. And there is still going to be a need for a space for all organizations. There's going to be a need for a gathering point. And people are going to need to have a base to touch down on at some point. I mean, you're seeing this in a lot of larger organizations have already announced some changes around this. So I think it was TD Bank is allowing employees to they have to work from a TD office for security purposes, but that can be anywhere. So whatever Toronto Dominion Bank branch is nearest to their house, if there's an open desk there, the employee can work from that a certain number of days a week, and then flex into wherever they should be going or their main office is the rest of the week. So I think that we will see more of those models over time, but I haven't heard of huge changes in Hartford. In Stanford, the brokers are all excited because they all think that there's going to be huge changes there, that everybody's going to be leaving New York and they're going to set up shop in Stanford, which our broker thinks is not really too likely. His thoughts were, look, people are they still have costs in Manhattan. Maybe over time they'll set up outposts in the burbs, but nobody's going to be moving en masse to the suburbs, especially out of New York. The issue that you have there is, which suburb do you move to? Which direction? Do you move to Long Island? Do you move to Westchester? Do you move to New Jersey? Do you move to Connecticut? And no matter which direction you move, you're going to inconvenience a big chunk of your staff. So the Stanford market, he at least thinks is going to be fairly stable for a while, but should see some growth from this, as some players in the city have opened up outposts.
Yeah, and if I could just editorialize a little bit. I mean, I think this is Bert. Yeah, you're probably not going to see a number of impacts for at least another 2, maybe 3 months. I believe that the banks have been given a lot of leeway and leniency to offer forbearance on a number of their loans. Particularly, that would fall in the C&I and commercial real estate part of their lending spectrum. So what that means is they won't be downgraded by their regulator for offering forbearance for shorter periods of time, like up to 3 months. But once that period rolls forward, I think you're going to that was probably offered, number one, out of a necessity of not upsetting bank capital ratios, but also wanting to, with a hope that we would be through this situation on the quicker side, as opposed to maybe more drawn out. Fed Chair Powell had a conference call this morning, or a video call this morning, where he was expressing a couple of things. One is that this is going to take a little bit longer time to work its way through the system, and that there's going to be more fiscal stimulus that's going to be needed to sustain the economy through this. So putting those pieces together, and it looks like we're not going to get really much impacts in the market in terms of like shifts in terms of values and spaces becoming available, and landlords being held with their feet to the fire, at least until we get into the June-July time frame, and then you might really start to see some cracks in the system and things happening.
When do you have to put some money down? When do we, if we're going to do something, at what point do we have to say, yeah, we want it,
I think
we're getting pretty close to the end of the year.
That's what I thought.
Yeah.
I think we're close to being able to say here's what we want in each of the markets, and I think that money wouldn't need to necessarily change hands till after the first of the fiscal year, is my understanding.
Calendar year.
Well,
January.
I mean, in terms of deposits,
fiscal year, in terms of deposits, yeah.
What is that, July?
July 1st.
Yeah, we're getting quite close.
Yeah. Okay, but I mean, I like the way you're speaking. I mean, you're on top of it. You're talking to these brokers. You're getting a feel for it. You see the ebb and flow.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, Hartford is a slower market in general, from what the brokers have advised, and they don't really, they haven't advised any change in strategy there. In Stanford, our broker has been very forthcoming that he's seen some slowing and some not. It's all it's on a client by client basis, and kind of what their view is and what their urgency is. So.
And if I can add, Eric, I think the list that we've actually worked down to are properties which are going to be, I think, sought after. Meaning, if you take a couple of properties that we're looking at in Stanford, for instance, high marketability, reasonable walks to the train station, a lot of appeal for that. Buildings that have been around for years, very stable rent rolls, things of that sort. Well diversified rent rolls. Hartford, I would say, the same thing in terms of, let's say the top 2 candidates that we're we're looking at. So you want to go into a building where you don't have to worry about the owner cheaping out on you in terms of services and amenities that you bargained for when you moved in. And so I think we're in good shape as far as that's concerned. Would you agree, Eric?
Totally.
Eric, you want to summarize this?
So yeah, and this I just wanted to bring back our comps in here just to kind of show where we're aiming for and where we're ending up, that relative to the rest of the state. So if you look at the averages per square foot, you'll see that we're coming in less on just a rent per square foot basis than what the state has done in their two most recent leases for the Department of Banking and the Department of Insurance. And if you look on a per employee basis, we're coming in line with basically what we're paying now in terms of costs, in terms of the average spaces that we're looking at in Hartford and the average in Stanford. So just to show that we are being responsible and we are sticking to that sustainability plan. So yeah, watch the space and look for our recommendation shortly.
So do you see, are we going to be moving by the first of the year?
Yes, I hope so. I think we've been managing our timeline to make sure that that's achievable.
Right.
And this whole COVID thing throws a wrench into it, but I mean, I think we can still manage to pull that off. And I don't want to be in a position where we're paying rent unnecessarily somewhere and not being able to use a building, or at least not be able to use the building because we are still stuck in another building.
Right.
So we'll work to make sure that's not the case and that we have this ready to go once things move back to normal.
I had another question, which is, because of the pandemic, have you found that there's, that you could have more employees working remotely more of the time?
Yes. So we've been nearly fully remotely working. We've been working nearly fully remotely since the 13th of July, or not July, I'm sorry, March. And I think that people are as effective as they were in the office. Certainly what we're hearing from senior staff and from employees. We just did an employee survey and people were very satisfied with being able to work from home and felt that they were accomplishing the same that they did in the office. I think that there are occasions where being in the same location would obviously make things easier. I'd love to have this conversation with you guys face to face.
Right.
But obviously we can't now. So I think down the road, we will be back in a situation where we will be able to be face to face, and let's be in the best space that we can. In the meantime, we have tools that allow us to work and be flexible. The other thing that doing this move in the middle of all of this uncertainty allows is it allows for us to implement things that might be harder to do in our current space, but being that we're going into new space, we can think of. So things like optimally placing desks for spacing and taking into account unidirectional walkways around the office, and building in the concept of social distancing into our office layout is something that I raised with our space planners today as they're mocking up layouts for us. So
yeah, that makes sense.
We're taking that into account, and it's I think the right thing that we should be doing now.
Right.
Have you noticed Eric or all of you, when you think about people getting together at certain key times, that you know, brainstorming and spitballing and creative synergies that happen when people are, in the same, kind of arena. Um, have you noticed that that has fallen off, or you actually you had, so many goals already outlined that everybody's going forward?
I mean, I think people are still getting together and they are still brainstorming. I mean, I know I've done a couple different sessions. Our marketing team, for example, got together to rethink through how we divide up work and how uh, do we had already made some good starts on a new approach in the space, but this was a more in-depth take on it, and I think this session went very well. I think a lot of it is us just getting used to working this way.
Yeah,
That's that. Go ahead.
just going to say we're just kind of wrapping up the staff survey now and bringing the staff survey in alignment with the Reopen Connecticut governor's plan. And a lot of those kind of open-ended responses that you're hearing kind of focus on these sorts of questions. The question about telecommuting, so we've got an audit compliance and governance committee meeting next week where once a year we take a look at the employee handbook. And this year we're adding some language to telecommuting. Telecommuting we've always allowed at the supervisor's discretion. And the language that we're adding this year essentially speaks to the lessons that we've learned with COVID-19, which is that we have the IT systems in place and people can work, have demonstrated effectiveness and efficiency working from their homes. You're right, John. In some of those responses, the open-ended responses, Lonnie, they speak about an inability to innovate together because they're not with others. Those who like that kind of interaction. Eric also asked the question around hoteling, which I thought was kind of interesting. We had envisioned our new office space of being an open space with, where you can just kind of plug in. I think before COVID-19, had he asked that question, we would have gotten a pretty high rate of, yeah, let's do it. But it was like the lowest in this survey. So people are totally timid, like in this environment. So we just had, Eric's doing the right thing, being conscious with the developers on the different properties to rethink, now with COVID-19, how we deal with our spacing plan, because people are unsure, they're concerned, and all those sorts of things. So we're taking all that into consideration.
Smart.
Yeah, I would just say that, I think one of the things that distinguishes the Green Bank is a collective sense of mission, and that some of that you really do need just to have the group together as a group in order to cultivate that and feel that. And so that, in the long run, there needs to be the space to be able to get people together when you need to get them together, to maintain that sense of look at us, look at this group of us that are working on this really important stuff together.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, yeah, we magically covered everything that I set out to today. So
Yes.
thank you for your time and your feedback.
Of course, Eric. I mean, really good stuff. I really appreciate it. And, what you are explaining in an hour and a half then represents hours and hours and hours and days worth of work. And so, we really appreciate that. And I think that, so we'll have the next meeting and get into the other side of the equation next time. And, if we need the third meeting, we can do it. But I would anticipate and I would hope that the full board will be will be happy to hear what we report at the end of June. So, unless there's anything else, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And I will second that. And all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Well, I'm not even going to ask for opposed or whatever else because we're out of here. All right. Well, thank you, folks.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. It was great.